Entrepreneur. A person who organizes, operates, and assumes the risk for business ventures, especially an impresario. The word comes from Old French, see enterprise, so reports the American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, published by Houghton Mifflin Company. And for entrepreneurs, America was and is truly a paradise. All business activity in the United States and its territories began as entrepreneurial adventure. Trace any corporation back to its beginnings, or the beginnings of its parent corporation, or the beginning of its parent's corporation, as is sometimes the case, and you'll find it began as an idea that would fill or help fill a need or desire on the part of human beings who would become customers. We look today at a complex multinational organization like IBM and forget that the company began in the mind of a single human being. Anyone who starts or causes to be started a business venture is an entrepreneur. An impresario is one who does in the world of entertainment what the entrepreneur does in the world of business. Quite often the two are combined, for certain businesses are endlessly entertaining for those deeply connected with them, as well as for their customers. Both need customers without whom they will quickly close their investment down the drain. The entrepreneurial adventure is endlessly attractive to those endowed with entrepreneurial spirits, adventurers in varying degrees, whose visions of the future tend to be hopeful and enthusiastic rather than defeatist. The entrepreneur is the person who says, "I think it'll be a big success." The non-entrepreneur says, "You're going to lose your shirt." A survey taken many years ago of the most successful people in a large American city turned up the fact that most of their ultimate success depended in large measure on the jobs they had lost. Whether they had resigned or been fired wasn't all that important. And under questioning, those very successful people thought about that interesting fact for perhaps the first time and shuddered to think of what their present lives might have been like had they clung to one of those early jobs which, at the time, seemed so important to them and their families. Now, they're not all entrepreneurs, of course, but they were people with faith in themselves and their ideas, which is the mark of success, wherever it's found. During those important steps in their careers, they were no doubt warned by well-meaning relatives and friends to hang on to that job they had held and lectured on the dark and dismal pitfalls of adventuring off on something as ephemeral and evanescent as an idea. But of course, good ideas are not ephemeral or evanescent, as their status of thought might indicate to the more fearful. They're the most important things on the planet Earth, and it's producing ideas that raises the human being to his or her highest levels of achievement. Ideas solve problems, make our lives infinitely more interesting and rewarding, less dangerous, better fed, better employed, richer in countless ways, and wonderfully more comfortable. Without ideas, we'd still be sitting in the trees grooming one another. All the creatures on the planet have life-saving techniques. Some are fleet of foot, others sharp of claw and fang. There are fish in the deep, dark trenches of the ocean that dangle tiny lanterns above their waiting jaws. But for the human being, there is the brain, the idea producer, to save his or her skin in myriad ways. And the United States, the only nation on the planet with the word happiness in its official chartering papers, offers a number of options to those desiring to share in the good life. One of those options is the right to go into business with little more than an idea and the determination to succeed. The idea that results in a person running the risks of starting his or her own business depends strictly upon the person's background, education, previous level of accomplishment, and aspirations. For most of us, going into business is a pursuit beset by many problems, irritations, headaches, sleepless nights, long hours, and low pay. Ah, yes, being in business for oneself does not necessarily mean an inordinately high income. On the contrary, it often means very little or no income at all for long periods of time. But once the business hits, Whether it takes 5 years or 15, you've got the world by the nether parts. You decide what you're worth in the salary and bonus departments, and the company can pay for much that would ordinarily come out of an employee's pay. On becoming truly successful, it usually takes longer than we realize when we begin. Like the decision to have a child, we seldom take into consideration the length and arduous nature of the contract. But if our idea is sound, and if we are sound, and if we fully understand the concept of service and the importance of working capital and constant upgrading of our product or service, and if we have the perseverance of Columbus, we'll wake up some fine morning to find ourselves one of the competent ones of our generation. We've achieved a kind of independence never known or perhaps understood by the employee, no matter how high he or she may travel in the hushed corridors of executive country. America's top executives working for large multinational corporations usually earn more in salary and perks, stock options and bonuses than the great majority of entrepreneurs. But the entrepreneur has something else. He has control. And once the business is truly successful, which means it's probably in a state of happy expansion, he or she can hire the best executives to run things while he or she takes a few months' rest in Hawaii or Gstaad or plays golf in Nairobi and does a bit of deep-sea fishing in the Seychelles. You say it might take 15 years for that kind of success? Yes, I do. But how long would it take you if you worked for Beatrice Foods or Chrysler? 15 or 20 years, I suppose, if ever. Right. And the 15 years aren't all pain, suffering, and sleepless nights. There's a lot of joy in there, too. There's the joy of seeing your own ideas in action and of watching your own ideas and efforts win against the competition. There's the joy of watching the money pour in along with the orders. There's a sort of kindly vindication in that. I resigned from CBS and station WBBM in Chicago in March of 1950. My friends at WBBM told me repeatedly what an idiot I was. I had reached the top. I went to work in the beautifully paneled, brass-trimmed elevators of the world-famous Wrigley Building in Chicago. I rubbed shoulders with the rich and famous, and I earned top dollar in my profession. Thousands, no millions, listened while I read the news or read the latest Jell-O commercial. Man, I was on top of the heap. I had it made, and I was only 28 years old. It does little good to remonstrate with an entrepreneur. Christopher Columbus, brilliant navigator that he was, could have spent his life in peace, navigating up and down the coastal waters of Europe and remaining within the known boundaries of the period's world maps. But at the edges of the known waters there appeared the terrifying legend, "Here there be dragons," and it was there that Columbus desired to sail, and it's there that every entrepreneur desires to sail. It's interesting to note that on the maps beyond the known world there was never a legend reading, "Here there be unlimited opportunity for exploration, no doubt much gold and silver and precious gems, and strange human creatures living beyond these boundaries, waiting for discoveries and development for the daring and intrepid sailor." Even though it had always been that way before, no one ever suggested that it might also be that way in still undiscovered areas. It's the natural proclivity of cartographers and advice-givers to look upon the unknown as bad, for they, like children going into a darkened basement alone, feel that the dark and the unknown must hold strange and fearful creatures unimaginable in the known and lighted world. They cannot think otherwise. It's their nature. Yet at the time of Columbus, not a single live dragon had ever been seen upon the planet Earth by anyone. Dragons were, in fact, fairy tale creatures, yet they always inhabited the uncharted regions of the world. It said so right on the maps. So when you get an idea that you think will result in an excellent business of your own, and it needn't be a new idea by any means, keep it to yourself and your secret notepad for a period of time while you simmer it on the rotisserie of your mind's consciousness and unconsciousness. Let it turn while you view it from every angle. Look at it from the standpoint of the worst possible scenario. If it's a good, sound idea, it should survive even the worst times, as good businesses do. Incidentally, there are recession-free businesses, and many businesses that do better in recessions than in good times. It was during the very worst years of the Great Depression that the American film industry really got it together. There were those delightful taffy merchants in uniform and wearing white cotton gloves in front of the better Los Angeles theaters. What wonderful hard taffy that was, and what opulent, magnificent palaces were the motion picture theaters of that time. For the American poor, they took the place of the great Gothic cathedrals of the Middle Ages. All of that and free dishes to boot, and the Saturday morning matinees. God, what cliffhangers! Remember Harold Lloyd on the face of that great clock? All for a dime, although older folks had to pay 15 cents. And there was Wrigley's Chewing Gum, which got its start as a premium in boxes of soap. And miniature golf, and Monopoly, and radio. What a time for the entrepreneur, and it was the very time, despite the worst doldrums the nation had ever experienced from a fiscal standpoint, that saw the beginnings of thousands of companies that are today among the giants of the world. And there were many, despite the opportunities, despite the options, that failed never to appear again. All those auto companies, for example. We had a Pierce Arrow at one time, and a Rio Flying Cloud, all now in the big garage in the sky. So what's your bag? Unfortunately, the decision to become an entrepreneur, like the decision to marry, does not at the same time confer upon the person making the decision a burst of improvement in the intelligence department. The person who has spent his or her life up to the time of decision in the assiduous avoidance of useful information will discover the same difficulty in further success that he or she has no doubt met in the past. Entrepreneurial activity is not an escape from discipline. It is, in fact, the exact opposite. If you're a creative genius with little affection or aptitude for keeping books, for example, make sure you have a partner you both trust and know to be competent in the areas of your incompetence, or be able to contract for such services, the very best you can find, incidentally, and make the daily examination of the books a part of your regimen, no matter how dull or uninteresting you may find it. Ignorance is, unfortunately, no excuse for failure. You can learn to read a financial statement and assess your accounts receivable, even if your hair grows to your shoulders. I commented at the beginning of this section that for entrepreneurs, America has always been a paradise. To thousands of worried, harried, struggling entrepreneurs, the word paradise will no doubt bring a wry smile or perhaps an earthy expletive commonly heard on the docks. For thousands of once hopeful companies, Chapter 11 seems like the only way out. Reorganization for the benefit of creditors, and not much benefit at that. You've got to be a foreign country in the American defense perimeter to be guaranteed any kind of security. Oh, I've heard all the comments, and at times muttered a few myself. There are no guarantees. Don't confuse opportunity with guarantee. And it's best that you get rid of that terrible word, security, now, once and for all. There's no such thing as security as long as you're alive. Dead, you're secure. Unborn, you're secure. If you're alive, you're the very epitome of insecurity. Think about it. You're on a small planet hurtling through space, the mystery of space, at about 1,000,000 miles an hour. The dinosaurs were here for millions of years, and were far more successful as living creatures than we've been with our short-lived appearance as Johnny-come-latelys, and they were extinguished in a matter of weeks because of a giant meteor that raised so much dust it obliterated the sun, and they froze to death. Security? Ah, there's no such thing, but there's opportunity. There's joy. There's love. There are all kinds of wonderful things to do and see and experience, but there's no security whatever. Do you call an 80-year existence in the billions of years the universe has been around security? We're secure in our foreknowledge of the time we've got, and we can see how well we can use that time. But the kind of security most people are looking for, that's something else. That's your home and car that the bank has as collateral for your loans. They can be resold, so you have to ask yourself, or at least it's a good idea to ask yourself, what do I want to do with my time, however short or long it may be? Do I want to make it big? Do I want to see the world and live in penthouse apartments overlooking the sea and drive fine European cars and command a 50-foot flybridge fisherman with twin diesels throbbing below my feet? Or do I want to make a difference with what I believe to be a very good idea or talent that I've worked very hard to hone to marketability? If the money comes, great. I can spend it as well as the next guy. But I'm happiest doing my thing, and I don't want a boss telling me what to do for the rest of my working life. I want to be independent as much as that's possible, considering I can only succeed to the extent that I serve others. My public, whatever that amounts to, is my boss. I must please those people, or they won't give me the money to buy the things I need and want. Elementary, my dear Watson. But if we have just that little time to live, who would want to spend it, as you say, tiptoeing through life, trying to make it safely to death? Lots of people. Short time, long time. Most people get very nervous when they think of being in charge of their own economic well-being. They want that check every week, the one with the great name at the top that makes everyone glad to cash it. And don't knock it. That's where your own key people will come from. If they were all in business for themselves, there'd be a heck of a lot more competition than there is. And keep in mind that competition only exists at all if you choose to play follow the leader. Rolls-Royce isn't in competition with anyone. Take a look at IBM and the rest of the top cats. People at the top of their lines of business. Nope, they're not concerned about competition. They're too busy creating. If you're a pace setter, you're not competing. You're leading. You're creating. You've carved your own niche out of the market, like Pogan Pole Kitchens or Baker Furniture. My company, the Nightingale Conant Corporation of Chicago, doesn't have any competitors. We have copiers and also rans. Sure, that's the sincerest form of flattery. But competitors? No. We never will have as long as we have the gung-ho creative management we've got and the team that puts it all together. You won't see us on Fortune's list of the top 500 corporations in America, but we're number one in our industry. We founded it, and we still look upon our company as a fledgling just getting its flying feathers. Someday, when we're on the big board, we'll probably be NC Corp. Pie in the sky? You know, people have been telling people like me that all of our lives. Do you know what pie in the sky really is? It's the vision of a piece of pie a truck driver gets as he approaches the truck stop. And it's pie in the sky only for a short while. Then, there it is, on the counter, dripping with sweet juice and apples oozing out. Helen, how about putting a scoop of vanilla ice cream right there on top? Thanks. That's darn good. That was pie in the sky, but now it's a delicious memory. We need to make our delicious visions real in our lives. That most of us downscale our visions into the easy-to-accomplish variety is a fact of life. Most of the time we're not even aware that the process of getting a strong vision and then making it come true is an operation, and seldom give much thought, if any at all, to the fact that if the process will work for a piece of apple pie, maybe it'll work for anything. The great majority of entrepreneurs make the same mistake of unconsciously playing follow the leader when they go into business that most people make just living their daily lives. There's an unspoken, unmentioned, perhaps unthought-about assumption that whatever people in great numbers are doing must be the right thing to do. Why? The great majority of people do not achieve unusual success. Why would we expect that getting in the same line with them in any endeavor would result in any sort of remarkable success? It's that we tend not to think about it. If all the motels look like that, or at least most of them, I guess it's okay to build mine to look like that. If all the other hardware stores I've seen look like that one over there, and I want to go into the hardware business, I guess it's okay to make my store look like that also. Or drugstore, or beauty salon, or real estate office, or barber shop, or grocery store, or supermarket, or electronics store. By looking, that is to say, by appearing to be no different from all the other people in that line of business, I can see to it that I'm competing with all the others who, of course, have a head start on me. That's why the fast food chains, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, and the rest have been successful. Nobody in the small towns and neighborhoods in which they're located had the brains or creative talent to start an independent operation as fetching and efficient. I know that because I drove my car from Southwest Florida all the way to Carmel, California, without seeing a single independent fast food operation with a sign reading, "If we can't serve you better, more delicious food than the big fast food chains, we'll pick up your check." Hey, don't try to buck the big boys, goes the myth, and myth it is. The fact is that a local, well-managed operation can beat a national chain operation hands down every time. And local can grow to regional, and it can still whip the pants off the national operation. It can be built into a fine, very substantial business and then sold for a ton of money, or gradually expanded into a national organization. I can remember when people were saying, "Hey, wait a minute, you're not going to compete against Hilton Hotels, are you?" Well, dozens have, and most of them are waxing fat and prosperous. The point I'm making here is that you don't have to pioneer a brand new industry the way my partner Lloyd Conant and I did in electronic audio publishing, or the way our good friends Wallace Johnson and Kemmons Wilson did with Holiday Inns, bless their hearts. Do you remember what the so-called auto courts were like before Holiday Inns came along to clean up the act? If you weren't bitten by a poisonous snake, you'd come away with body lice, or worse. Holiday Inns did for the traveler, especially the traveling family, what Louis Pasteur did for milk and foods. When Cervantes wrote that the journey is better than the inn, he wasn't just speaking philosophically. You could be, and frequently were in the inns of old, robbed, if not actually killed, and all your possessions liberated. But Holiday Inns are now undergoing another metamorphosis in the big cities. Those glass skyscrapers bearing the Holiday Inn signs are a far cry from the first places established on the outskirts of Memphis, but they're still hard to beat in the hospitality business. My wife Diana and her sister Vannie stayed in a Holiday Inn hotel in downtown San Francisco recently, while I received a new shoulder joint at Presbyterian Hospital. They loved it. The people there couldn't do enough for them. And as the Holiday Inn people know, it's people that make the difference, not just steel and glass and $5 million lobbies. You don't have to pioneer a new industry if you don't want to, although there's fun and profit in that if you can stay the distance. Instead, you can go into an old, well-established business and just do it a bit better in a more interesting way. And that applies to any business. There isn't one that's being done as well as it could be. The best ad still has to be written, although there are some mighty good ones out there. It's all a matter of how hard you want to work, for how long, and how creatively. I don't know how many American entrepreneurs could be called wonderfully successful, or even what percentage. It's a small percentage, I'm sure. Most of them, as I said, are still playing copycat with each other. They join associations and attend conventions and conferences to find out what the more successful among them are doing, but it's still largely a game of playing copycat. Here and there, the creative independent makes it big. One time I was having breakfast at a small village cafe in Punta Gorda, Florida. That's a delightful small town on the southwest coast of Florida, about 50 miles south of Sarasota, 20 miles or so north of Fort Myers. It's an old town in which you can still hear the crackers crunching on the still nights. There are lots of old homes, many with tin corrugated roofs and brick streets. It wasn't much of a cafe, exactly like a zillion others throughout the South, but on this particular morning the owner asked if he could sit with me with a cup of coffee. He said, "Could you tell me what I could do to increase my breakfast business?" And since I'd seen his menu and had a good look at his clientele, I said, "Yes, I can tell you how to substantially increase your breakfast business. Start serving country ham with eggs, grits, and big homemade baking powder buttermilk biscuits and red-eye gravy." He looked at me silently, his eyes in their perpetual squint through the cigarette smoke. And then he said, "Oh, my cook would never stand for that. She'd never agree to it in 1,000 years. So I said, "Well, if your cook's in charge of this place, why are you asking me what you could do to improve your breakfast business?" He smiled and shook his head, went back to his cash register, mumbling, "Nope, she'd never agree to that in 100 years. Well, I'd never seen his cook. Whoever she was, she had him buffaloed and apparently decided what would and wouldn't be served in the place. He never asked my advice again. He's still there, eking out a living. But because I liked living there for a while, and because there was no decent place to eat, I got my friend Don Donaldson to join me on a venture which eventually built a fine restaurant on what had been an old, ruined, tumble-down pier which we restored. And the restaurant's still there today, a 4-star restaurant now, serving wonderful meals in a beautiful setting with a marina and a view of Charlotte Harbor that's second to none in the state of Florida. In case you're ever in the neighborhood, drop in for a delicious lunch or dinner. Ride the only glass-walled elevator in southwest Florida up to Earl Nightingale's restaurant. I think you'll like it. And while you dine, you can watch the yachts coming and going and perhaps a porpoise or two. The sunsets will bring tears to your eyes. There's an organization in Hurst, Texas, that's a part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, named the National Association for the Self-Employed. They've told me that there are about 12 million self-employed people in the United States. Are self-employed people entrepreneurs? Not necessarily. If the definition of an entrepreneur is a person who organizes, operates, and assumes the risk for business ventures, the many thousands of physicians, dentists, CPAs, and attorneys are not entrepreneurs. Some of them are, but most are not. They're simply self-employed professionals in business to practice their specialty. Some are wonderfully successful. Most earn a pretty good living, and some have a hard time. For the purposes of the NASE, a self-employed person is one who has 5 or fewer employees, as a doctor might or a small attorney's office. It also includes people in real estate, financial planners, insurance people, and the keepers of small shops, barber, hairstylists, all the rest. Shopkeepers are entrepreneurs, whether they act the part or not. There's a story about a well-known shopkeeper in the Bronx who was struck by a car one day and knocked down. The police officer for the area, who knew and liked the man very much, rushed to his aid. He put his own coat over the man's prostrate form and asked, "Mr. Steinberg, are you comfortable?" And Mr. Steinberg gave the question little thought and replied, "No, I'm not comfortable, but I make a good living." Well, I think Mr. Steinberg typifies the American shopkeeper. Quite often the shop is much more than a place in which one finds his good living. It's often a place where one finds his very being, where he spends the day chatting with old friends and neighbors as he serves their needs, where he can complain about the weather and the dismal plight of the Mets, or the Kansas City Royals, or the San Francisco Giants. It's a place where he interfaces with the people of his world, the people who give him his identity and raison d'etre, his very reason for being. Quite often, retirement is something he or she would rather not think about. There are no burning desires or impetuous goals tugging at the mind of this person. He or she makes a good living, pays taxes on whatever share of the income he or she feels is fair, votes in the local and national elections, and tries to stay healthy. And there's nothing wrong with that, nothing at all. Delicatessen, convenience store, cards and notions, stationery, and a few office supplies, whatever the business, it works, and it's an option for us all. Such businesses come up for sale regularly in cities and towns across the country as their owners die or are forced by ill health or infirmity or whatever reason to sell out. They're well established, sufficiently profitable for a family to earn a satisfactory living. It's a matter, as it is with most people, of fitting the living standard to the income. But it is also quite possible, and also an option, to fit the income to the living standard. Once one decides how he or she wants to live and what it will take in the way of income to live like that, one has a goal, an income goal to reach. And for such people, America is also a paradise, because in America, as it is in many Western democracies and now the Pacific Basin, the sky is no longer the limit in the income department. The income is only tied to what one does to earn it in the way of providing services or products for customers. But for those who wish to climb into the higher realms of income, perhaps membership in the National Association for the Self-Employed won't cut it. Maybe it will. And it's here that the entrepreneur really comes into his or her own. As I said earlier, all of us come from humble beginnings if we go back far enough, and for most of us, we don't have to go back very far. Quite often 20 or 30 years will do quite nicely. But if a person is to make the move from a family of quite average income into the realms of higher income, that is, fitting the income to the lifestyle goals he chooses, with his lifestyle goals in the upper brackets, that person is going to have to make some internal adjustments first. First, he must know that the pathway is open to him. He must believe that there are no artificial barriers such as hereditary class restrictions to his climbing all the way to the very top if that's what he desires, and there are not. He must then adopt, practice, and make a daily part of himself an attitude of cheerful expectancy. He must know, in italics, that the success he's beginning to dream about will be his, that it's only a matter of time, that he is leaving the ways of his family, neighbors, relatives, school chums, and acquaintances, and climbing into the more rarefied realms of achievement and wealth. He knows it will take time, but the time will pass anyway, whether he climbs out of the average way of life or not, and he needs to know that he must acquire an education of a sort that will qualify him to find his place in those loftier realms of achievement and wealth. And he needs to know that he will become what he thinks about, and he's got to stop thinking in ordinary ways. The success he seeks is not ordinary, it's extraordinary, and he must begin immediately to think in extraordinary ways. He needs to begin asking himself, how can I be of unusual service to enough people that my commission on that service will add up to the lifestyle I've chosen for myself? All entrepreneurs in business for themselves, as head of their own enterprises, are, in the final sense, on straight commission. They can take no more from the business than their fair share. If their fair share comes to, let's say, $300,000 a year, that enterprise must either serve a great many people or sell a very high-ticket product. For example, if you sell someone a yacht for $600,000, your commission on that sale might come to $30,000. You'll need 10 such sales to earn your $300,000. Or you can make a product on which you earn $1 apiece and sell the product to 300,000 people. Now that's less than the total population of a good-sized American city. Either will do. And if you can double your sales in either case, you can earn $600,000 a year, or half the salary of Joe Montana, quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. Who incidentally is worth every penny of it. At least you're starting to think along lines that no one in your family since the dim beginnings of Homo sapiens has ever thought before, and as you do, your inner culture is undergoing a significant change. The cutting away from the average has to begin, as everything has to begin, in the mind, and from the mind to the attitude, then back into the mind until it's all at peace, and the ideas start to come. Interestingly, this is not the way most entrepreneurs start things. They usually get started in an attempt to prove a point, to prove they know what they're talking and thinking about. Quite often an entrepreneur begins as an employee, pleading with his boss to take a new tack. The boss shakes his head like the repository of all wisdom he often believes himself to be, and says, "No, it'll never work." Whereupon the burgeoning entrepreneur says, "It will work. It's a good idea. It'll revolutionize this business, and I'm going to do it. I quit." Well, it seldom happens that quickly. There may be months of agonizing, long talks into the wee hours of the morning with friends, even a few sorties into the possibility of raising money on the outside before the final decision is made. But dozens of the most successful companies in the world began in the mind of an employee who had to quit and start his own business to prove he was right. Quite often he had no lifestyle goals to shoot at, just a burning desire to do what he tried unsuccessfully to get his boss to let him do within the framework of the organization he worked for. One day, a smiling accountant shows him his company's profit picture, and he realizes he's rich, and that he and the family can move out of the old place with a hole in the living room carpet and the one-car garage into something nicer, which will more accurately represent his true place in the community. Now, that usually takes 15 to 20 years to happen, but it does happen in a lot less time than that in this new age we've stumbled into. But all of this makes the entrepreneur a different kind of cat. The fact that he got the idea for the change in the first place sets him apart. Everyone else is usually quite content to go along as before, without thinking about anything at all, even his boss. The fact that he became so involved with the idea sets him apart. He's a person with the courage of his convictions, to use an overworn cliché. He believes so firmly that he's right, he's willing to stake his job security on the idea and go it alone. Now that makes him quite different. And if he'd been employed by 3M or some other change-oriented companies, they would have financed his idea within the company, given him the people he needed, and told him to go ahead and make it work. And if it did become all that he thought it would become, he would become as well rewarded within the old organization as he might become as head of his own company on the outside. In that case, he would have become an intrapreneur, and he could go from one success to another, all within the supportive framework of a major multinational corporation. He would have access to millions of dollars worth of equipment, including the latest computers, first-class people, an existing plant, and unlimited financial backing. It all depends on the outfit you're working for to begin with. But if you want to make it on your own in your own organization, and most entrepreneurs do, then you must become a people person, whether you like the idea or not. You have two audiences that must like you and feel you have their interests at heart. One, your customers and prospects, and two, your employees. People make all the difference in the world, and if they're not with you, you go out of business. It's people you're serving, and it's people you depend upon for a part of the money they earn each month. Now, they'll happily share it with you if you give them good service, if they feel important in your place of business or using your product or service. They don't care about the business school numbers. They're like flowers. They turn their faces and open their wallets and purses to the radiance of people who love and respect them enough to do business their way. People will make you rich or keep you broke, depending on the way you serve them. You should make up your mind at the outset, if you're planning to become a successful entrepreneur, that you're going to make people outside the organization and inside the organization your special concern. People make the difference, and they should teach that at the university business schools. You can't lose money on a customer if you treat him or her the way he or she should be treated. Marshall Field used to receive a lot of kidding because of his policy of allowing merchandise to be returned if not completely satisfactory to the buyer. Women used to pretend to buy expensive fur coats, wear them for an important occasion, then return them for a full credit the following day. But when kidded about such things, Marshall Field used to request that the woman's account be sent up to show to his criticizing friend. Without fail, the woman was a good regular customer who bought many other things on her account. She was a good customer, and if she wanted to borrow a mink coat for an evening, so what? She was still a good customer. It was his treatment of the customer that was largely responsible for Marshall Field's outstanding success. It's the same story at Neiman Marcus, Macy's, I. Magnon's, and the rest. The customer is queen, or king, as the case may be. There's never an excuse on the part of management for a customer being mistreated in any way. It simply shows a lack of training, and the lack of training of employees is one of the greatest problems of American business. Not giving recognition to the customer is the worst offense anyone in business can commit. Recognition is number one on the hierarchy of human wants. Recognition is number one. Stimulation or change is number two, and security is number three. The good business person and every one of his employees, because of their training, can give the customer all three of those. The customer should be recognized, if at all possible, when he or she comes into the place of business. If the customer has to wait in line, special attention should be given to those waiting. Even a glance and the words, "I'll be with you as soon as I can," gives the required recognition. And no customer should ever leave a business, a gas station, convenience store, restaurant, or any other sort of business where other human creatures are involved in any way without special attention being given to thanking the customer. Even a good automated teller at a bank or savings and loan can say thank you, even if it only appears on the monitor screen. Thank you for doing business with us. It's recognition. As to stimulation and change, number two on the human want list, that's another side of good management. The business should never be permitted to settle down into a well-worn groove of sameness. Even little changes can make a big difference. Change is a sign of life, of interest on the part of management. It shows management cares about the business and the customer. And security can be there too. Good service is a kind of security, as is a fine product and a refund policy. The customer needs to be given special care and thanked for sharing his or her hard-earned income with our place of business. Reminding is as important as initial training and regular inspection. It's so easy to fall back into bad habits. Customers should not wait to pay their checks, not a second longer than absolutely necessary. Restaurant customers should never have to sit and wait for their checks to be delivered to the table. Customers are not supposed to be waiters. Don't make them wait. Give them their checks before they're through dining. Greet them with a smile at the cash register, and thank them, really thank them, and look at them when they pay their check. It makes them feel important to you, and of course they are important to you. They'll put you out of business if you don't give them the recognition they need. It's all so easy, really. All we have to do is treat customers the way we ourselves like to be treated. Never underestimate the customer. There are no unimportant customers, simply because there are no unimportant people. They want three things in this order. They want recognition more than anything else in the world. Next, they want stimulation or change. And finally, they want security. You can give them all three, and if you're wise, you'll never fail to give them all three. The entrepreneurial opportunity is always there for those of us willing and eager to accept the risks and pay the price. Is it worth it? Of course it's worth it.